this episode, we move into business processes, which may sound at first like a business operations topic rather than a cybersecurity topic, but certified in risk and information systems control, see risk. Business processes are one of the clearest ways to understand where risk actually lives. A process is the repeatable flow of work that helps an organization achieve something important, whether that means serving customers, moving money, delivering care, managing records, or supporting internal decisions. That matters because risk rarely harms an organization in the abstract. It usually interferes with a process that leadership depends on, and once that process is disrupted, the business feels the consequences through lost revenue, delayed services, damaged trust, compliance issues, or operational confusion. For a beginner, this is a major shift in thinking. Instead of seeing cybersecurity as a set of tools standing guard around technology, you begin to see it as part of the larger effort to keep important business work functioning the way the organization needs it to function. When you understand business processes clearly, many later ideas in C risk become easier because you can finally see what the organization is actually trying to protect, support, and keep running smoothly. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A business process can be understood as the organized sequence of activities that turns effort into an outcome the organization values. It has a purpose, it uses people and technology, it depends on information, and it usually produces an output that supports customers, employees, leaders, regulators, or other parts of the business. A payroll process, for example, is not just a software tool or a spreadsheet. It is the full chain of tasks, approvals, data handling, timing, and responsibility needed to pay employees correctly and on time. The same is true for customer onboarding, order fulfillment, claims handling, patient scheduling, vendor payment, or incident escalation. Each process is a practical way the organization creates value or maintains control over something that matters. In C risk, this matters because a risk professional cannot judge exposure well without understanding how work actually moves through the business. If you do not understand the process, then you may misunderstand what is important, where dependencies exist, how failure would spread, and which controls would truly matter when conditions become stressful. One reason business processes matter so much is that they connect strategy and daily operations. Leadership may define goals, objectives, and risk expectations, but those ideas only become real when they are carried out through processes that people follow every day. A company may want to improve customer trust, grow revenue, maintain resilience, or meet strict legal obligations, yet none of those goals will happen by themselves. They depend on processes working correctly across departments, systems, and time. This is why C risk places business processes inside Domain 1 instead of treating them as a side issue. Governance needs to understand what the organization is doing in practice, not just what it says it wants to do in strategy documents. Once you see processes as the bridge between leadership intent and operational reality, it becomes obvious why they matter to risk. A weak process can quietly undermine an important business objective even if the technology around it looks strong. A strong process, on the other hand, can support consistency, accountability, and resilience even in environments where pressure and change are constant. Another important lesson is that business processes are not only about efficiency. Many people hear the phrase process and immediately think about reducing delay, increasing speed, or making work feel more organized. Those things matter, but in the context of C risk, a process is also a control environment. It defines who does what information is used, how decisions are made, where approval is needed, and how the organization tries to prevent, detect, or correct mistakes before they become more serious. That is why process design affects risk so directly. If a process has unclear handoffs, weak review points, inconsistent data handling, or informal exception practices, the organization may be exposed even if everyone involved is working hard. The weakness may not be visible right away because the process might still appear to function under normal conditions. The real problem often shows up under pressure. When time is short, volumes rise, systems fail, or responsibilities overlap. A mature C-risk mindset sees business processes not just as pathways for work, but as structures that either support disciplined decisions or quietly allow exposure to grow. Every business process also has inputs, activities, decisions, and outputs, and understanding those elements helps a beginner think more clearly about where risk can emerge. Inputs may include customer information, internal records, transaction requests, system data, or employee actions. Activities include the work performed to move the process forward, while decision points determine whether the next step should continue, stop, escalate, or change direction. Outputs may be a completed order, a validated record, a customer response, a payment, a management report, or some other result the organization depends on. This matters because risk can appear at any point in that flow. The input may be inaccurate, the activity may be performed incorrectly, the decision may be made by the wrong person, or the output may reach the wrong destination or arrive too late to matter. When you think about processes in this way, you begin to understand why vague talk about securing systems is not enough. C-Risk wants you to understand how business work actually moves, because that movement shows where reliability, confidentiality, integrity, accountability, and timing truly affect business outcomes. Process ownership is another major concept because a process without a clear owner often becomes a process with uneven accountability. A process owner is the person or function responsible for how the process operates, what it is supposed to achieve, how changes are managed, and whether risks within that process are understood and addressed. This does not mean the owner performs every step personally, but it does mean someone must care about the process as a complete business activity rather than as a collection of disconnected tasks. For beginners, this is a very useful idea because it clarifies that process risk is not just a technical issue delegated to technology teams. If a customer account process fails, the business owner of that process has a stake in the consequences, even if the underlying systems are operated by someone else. Clear process ownership helps the organization notice gaps, coordinate across teams, and make sensible decisions when exceptions, control weaknesses, or design changes appear. Without ownership, people may focus only on their small part of the flow and assume someone else is watching the full picture, which is one of the easiest ways for risk to spread unnoticed. Business processes also reveal dependencies, and dependencies are where many organizations discover that their resilience is weaker than they assumed. A process may depend on a specific application, a data source, a vendor, a team with specialized knowledge, a facility, a timing sequence, or a network connection that nobody fully appreciated until it failed. This is why process understanding is so valuable in risk management. It helps the organization see not only what a process is supposed to do, but what it requires in order to keep doing it consistently. A payroll process may depend on accurate employee records, timely approvals, banking connections, and a limited group of staff who know how to resolve exceptions. A customer support process may rely on a platform, identity checks, trained agents, and data integrity across several systems. When those dependencies are not understood, the business may believe it is stable while actually resting on fragile assumptions. C-Risk wants learners to notice those relationships early, because risk is often hidden inside things the organization depends on, but has never fully mapped, challenged, or prioritized. Criticality is another essential idea tied to business processes, because not every process matters to the organization in the same way or at the same level. Some processes are central to revenue, customer trust, legal reporting, safety, or mission delivery, while others are helpful but less immediately vital. This difference matters because the organization has limited resources and cannot treat every process as if failure would carry identical consequences. A delayed coffee order for the break room and a delayed wire transfer approval process are not the same kind of business issue, even if both involve requests, approvals, and data. C-Risk teaches that risk decisions should be tied to criticality, which means understanding how much damage, disruption, or loss would result if a process slowed down, failed, produced bad output, or operated outside expectations. Criticality also influences how much control, monitoring, testing, and leadership attention a process deserves. When learners understand that, They stop looking at business work as one flat field of activity and begin to see the organization as a set of processes with different weights, different consequences, and different levels of exposure. Standardization and variation also play an important role in process risk. Some level of flexibility is often necessary because different locations, customer groups, or business units may face different realities, but too much uncontrolled variation can create serious problems. When every team performs an important process differently, the organization may lose visibility, consistency, and confidence in the output. Errors become harder to detect, training becomes harder to scale, and leadership may struggle to know which version of the process is actually working. On the other hand, forcing rigid standardization where the business truly needs flexibility can create workarounds, frustration, and local behavior that is technically compliant on paper but ineffective in practice. A strong C-risk mindset does not assume one extreme is always best. Instead, it asks how much consistency is needed to reduce risk while still allowing the process to function effectively across real business conditions. That is why process governance matters. It helps the organization decide which parts of the flow must remain stable, which parts can adapt, and how variation should be controlled so it does not quietly become unmanaged exposure. Controls inside business processes deserve special attention because they are often the mechanism that keeps the process trustworthy. A control may be a review, an approval, a reconciliation, a validation step, a separation of duties, a monitoring activity, or some other measure that helps prevent, detect, or correct problems. In a healthy process, controls are not randomly sprinkled into the workflow after the fact. They are placed where they support the purpose of the process and where failure would otherwise create meaningful risk. A review control in a low-value part of the process may offer little benefit, while a missing review at a major decision point may expose the organization to fraud, error, privacy loss, or financial damage. This is one reason process understanding is so important. You cannot place good controls if you do not know where the process is vulnerable or where the output matters most. C-risk teaches that control effectiveness should always be considered in relation to the business process it supports. A control that sounds strong in isolation may still be poorly designed if it interrupts the wrong point, ignores the real dependency, or fails to address the actual consequence the organization is trying to avoid. Process breakdowns are especially instructive because they often show the organization where assumptions were hiding. A process can break because of poor data, unclear ownership, weak training, system outages, rushed changes, missing approvals, third-party failures, or simple misunderstanding between teams. What makes process breakdowns so important in C-risk is that they usually create business consequences quickly. When a process fails, customers may not be served, money may not move correctly, records may become inaccurate, legal obligations may be missed, and leadership may receive flawed information. This is why process risk should never be dismissed as merely operational clutter. Operational clutter becomes business damage very quickly when enough of it touches an important flow of work. A mature organization looks at breakdowns not only as isolated mistakes, but as evidence about design, control placement, dependency awareness, and cultural discipline. For a beginner, this is one of the clearest ways to understand the value of process thinking. It helps you move beyond blaming a single person or system and instead ask what in the flow of work allowed the failure to happen or allowed a small problem to become a larger one. Change is another major source of process risk because even a well-designed process can become unstable when the environment around it shifts. New technologies, new regulations, mergers, staffing changes, outsourcing, growth, and product expansion can all affect the way a process works or the assumptions it depends on. A process that once fit the business may become too manual, too slow, too dependent on one team, or too loosely controlled for the new conditions. This is why organizations need to review processes over time rather than treating them as fixed forever once documented. C-risk encourages learners to see change as something that can quietly alter risk even when the business still feels familiar from the inside. A new vendor may affect reliability, a new platform may change approval logic, or a growing customer base may increase the impact of delays that once seemed minor. Process awareness helps leadership ask better questions during change. It helps the organization understand what must remain stable, what needs redesign, and where hidden dependencies or control gaps may appear as the process evolves. Business processes also matter because they shape the quality of information that leaders rely on. Reports, dashboards, metrics, customer records, financial outputs, and operational status updates all come from processes. If the underlying process is weak, then the information produced by that process may also be weak, delayed, incomplete, or misleading. This creates a larger problem because leadership decisions are only as good as the information supporting them. A poorly controlled reporting process can make the organization believe risk is lower than it actually is. A flawed exception handling process can hide recurring problems behind closed tickets that were never truly resolved. A weak data entry or reconciliation process can create downstream confusion that spreads into compliance, finance, operations, and customer service all at once. In C risk, this matters because business processes are not just how work gets done. They are also how the organization sees itself. If the process is unreliable, then the organization's view of its own condition may become unreliable too, which makes good governance much harder and good risk decisions much less likely. When you step back and look at this topic as a whole, the main lesson becomes very clear. Business processes are not background administrative flows sitting outside risk management. They are the living pathways through which the organization creates value, serves customers, meets obligations, and depends on technology, people, data, and decisions to function in a controlled way. That is why C-Risk treats them as a foundational concept. Understanding a process means understanding where work happens, where ownership matters, where controls belong, where dependencies hide, how criticality should be judged, and how failure would affect the business in real terms. Once that view becomes natural, risk management becomes much more practical and much less abstract. You stop asking only whether a system has a weakness and start asking what process that weakness could disrupt, who depends on that process, how serious the outcome would be, and what kind of oversight or control would actually protect the organization. That shift in perspective is exactly why business processes deserve serious attention in this domain, because they show where business purpose and technology risk truly meet.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.